All right, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. Let me close that. So welcome, guys. Today we're learning advanced CSS. Last week you guys did HTML and some CSS. The CSS part was hard for you, most of you, which is fine. That's the whole reason. So today we're gonna learn more advanced concepts of CSS. So today we're gonna learn, and also we're gonna learn GIT, which is new to most of you. And I would say this is the first time you guys going to learn something more like something that developers do, basically like a programming sense. So GIT is more like into the programming world. So CSS and HTML are more of styling and making the website look nice. So these are some of the things we're going to learn today. We're going to learn selectors. We're going to learn forms, how to create forms, and also how to style them. We might learn some animations, but we might skip that and save time. We're going to learn Flexbox, which is really important. If you don't learn Flexbox, it's going to be really hard for you to design websites, especially mobile-friendly websites. That's what we're going to learn today. I'm going to give you resources for Flexbox, which would be a website cheat sheet for you to use and save somewhere. We're going to learn responsive web design, and you can learn what that is. We're going to learn Git, GitHub, and our Git flow. So, and we're going to explain that in details later. So let's get started. Before we even get started, let us talk about CSS, because last week we haven't went in depth into it. So what is CSS? So let's go here. CSS. Let's go to the W3 schools. Okay. So CSS, the word CSS stands for cascading style sheets. If we go to the intro right here, it stands for where is it? I don't know why they didn't put it here. It stands for cascading style sheets. I explained to some students last week. Cascading, the word cascading, it's like waterfall, something like cascading or falling. So CSS has rules basically, and we will learn those rules. The rules is that one of the first rules is that CSS applies from top down. So if you have a CSS document, then the first rule is most important, and then it goes down from there. And if you have rules at the bottom, then the top rules are going to be overwritten, right? If they're exactly the same, and we're going to learn more about that. So CSS, it helps the website look nicer. So if you don't have a CSS, then your website is going to look really bad, like from like 1990s websites, right? Where they had only like just text and links and things like that. So today, as you can see, this website now has colors. It has like these, the navigation is like when you hover over it, it has like a different color. Like everything looks nicer. Like this website is not the most beautiful website ever, but if you go to some websites, like let's say like this website, which we will learn, Flexbox, I see it's different. It has like a lot of styling. As you can see, things are laid out differently. You see some of the boxes have like curve at the top. You're gonna learn that, how to make those curves, and all that stuff. You see how things look. The background is black, dark, and yeah. So that's what CSS does. It helps you kind of like style things and make it look nice. And it works only with HTML. CSS works with the browser. So most browsers, Chrome, all of them, they understand what CSS is. They apply the rules and everything. So all you have to do is just learn the rules of CSS, and then the browser is going to do the work. Okay. So today we're going to learn a little more advanced concepts. Last week you learned a couple of basic concepts about CSS. So we learned about, let's go down here all the way. So last week you learned, we learned selectors, basically how to select an element like this and then style it, right? We learned classes. So what is a class? Class is when you're targeting it, you say dot, and then when you want to add it to the HTML, you define it like this, right? You define it like that. And then we learned a little bit about the box model, which is how all HTML or CSS websites are. Everything is a box. And we learned the margin, border, padding, and the content is basically the text or whatever. And here's another example of the box model, right? We haven't learned exactly, we haven't seen a good example of how to include CSS in HTML. And here's the image of how it's included. So this is internal, and then there is also external way. And I'm going to show you an example today on my computer. Okay. So yeah, so we're gonna learn advanced selectors. So we learned the selectors such as like the element selectors, the class, and the ID. So there's new selectors now. So there's child selectors. Child selectors are basically so in HTML, basically when we write HTML. So let's open a new bin. So I can show you an example of that. So in HTML, if you write something like, let's say, a div, and then inside the div we have h2, and let's write test here. Keyboard's not working with me. h2, and then we close the div. So this div is a parent. This div is a parent of h2, right? So, and then if you put something here like paragraph test 1, then the paragraph is a sibling of h2, right? So we're just using the family terminology. And then if you have, let's say, inside the paragraph, if you have another element, which is, let's say, span, and then you say, hey, test, then who can tell me what the span is? Is it a child? What is it? What is the relationship between the span and the div? Who can guess? So the span is a descendant of div, right? So you could also say the span is like the grandchild of div, right? Because P is the child of div, and the div is the parent. Okay, so we're just using like family terminology to define. So if I tell you, if I ask you what is the relationship between P and div, then you say div is a parent. So that's where this child came from, right? So when we're selecting in HTML, in CSS, we could say it like this. Where is the pen I just created? We could say it like this. So we could say div, and then we could select. So you could say div, and then say h2, right? So now you selected a child, which is h2, right? And you could also connect to P, and then create the rules like that, right? So that's how you select a child selector. It's simple as that. There's also you don't have to also do like this. You don't have to have this. You could write it like this, and then it will become a descendant, right? You could leave it off. That's another way. If you want to connect a descendants, this is how you connect them, right? So you keep adding that. If they're siblings, they go next to each other like this, like we just did right here, like that. Okay. Any question about that child selector? It usually comes up in so yeah, it's in CSS. You will see people using it in different ways, but you'll get the hang of it when you use it for a little bit. All right.
Can you go to the example? Sorry.
What is that? Go ahead.
Could you go to the example?
Go back. Yeah.
So anything after the div would be considered a child.
Yes. So this H2 is child, P is a child, and then span is a child of P. So
Okay.
it's the grandchild of div.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you said like if they're equivalent, like body, div, then they would be you would be using the greater than sign. That's how you
Yeah.
it instead of having comma. And if they're siblings, you would have comma.
Yeah, if you have siblings, you have a comma. Yeah, exactly. And if you want to select the span, then this is how you select the span. You say span like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so because these are two descendants, so that's how you select them. But if they're siblings, it's a comma and it'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other question? Hanan asked, is the sidebar next to the div necessary? So the sidebar, the example here, the example we gave here, this is from the, I think it's not in here, that it's supposed to be HTML here, but this is basically saying the div has a ID. So it's like saying like this, ID is equal to sidebar, right? And then you could just say, basically you're saying like the div, because there could be many divs, right? And then you want to define, you want to specifically target one, and you just say sidebar, right? So we're targeting only this div. Now we only have one div, but if you have multiple divs, then that will be a problem if you don't have something to identify, right? Any other question? But all right. And the more you practice, the easier it gets. Okay. Pseudo classes, especially dynamic pseudo classes, are important to understand. You might not come across them all the time, but it's good to understand. So what are they? What are the pseudo classes? Pseudo classes are not in HTML. So right here, they actually do not exist in HTML. What are they? So these are selectors, just like the class selector or the ID selector, but they happen only when the user interacts with the web page, right? So they only happen when the user interacts with the web page. What are the examples? So one example would be a link. Another one is a user action. So some examples of a link is, so let's actually create a link here. So let's get rid of this. Let's create a link. So who can help me with the link? is a test for you guys. What is the tag for a link? Anyone remembers? A tag. Okay, good. It's hard for me to read the chat. A tag. What does the A tag have? What is the attribute for the link? href. Okay, good job. So href is the attribute for link, and then we're just gonna add a empty link. Let's close it and give it something like, this is the link. Hey, okay. So now it's gonna show you here, this is the link. So by default, links are blue, right? And they're underlined. If you want to change that, then you have to change with CSS. That's how links are. When we click a link, it so what we could do is we could change the color of that when we click it. So now if we click this link, I don't know where it's gonna take us. It's not gonna take us anywhere. But as you can see, we clicked it, it changed the color, right? So that is a user behavior. That's what we're talking about here. The link and also visited. So now it's visited, right? Now it's visited. That's why the color is different. So what we could do is we could actually change that by going here to CSS and saying A, which is the link, and then visited. I think it's two semicolons, right? It's one, okay. Visited. And this, when you see this, when you see these the way it's written here, that means this is a pseudo class, right? All pseudo classes have that, right? So pseudo class have that. To keep that in mind. So we could say visited, we could say color red. Now, as you can see, right? So that means this link is visited. If we create another link, it's going to be blue. I mean, all links are blue now because the web page refreshed, but let's break it into a line, BR. Okay. Now let's click the top one. It should become red when we click it. I mean, they're both red. Okay, I think they both, because they have the same URL. So let's say something like test this one. Hopefully that changes that behavior. Yep. So as you can see, the first one we visited and it's that color, right? So that's what you could do. So when you go to Google and you search in something on Google, you'll see that in general, the links you clicked are different color. So that's what we're talking about when we say visited. And also a link is just basically the way it is right now. So right now, this one is blue. You could change that by saying a link, and then change that behavior to whatever, orange. Okay. So that's what we're talking about. And then there is also other behaviors like the hover and active. So these are user actions. So the first one is actually a link. So it's not a user action, but these are links. These are user actions. So hover is when you hover over the link. So we could actually change that. We could make that happen. So let's refresh it. Okay. Oh, what did we do? Okay. So let's get rid of this. Now they're blue. Okay. So when we hover over it, we could just say a hover. So color red. Now it's not even clicking, it's hovering over now. So when we hover over it, it should change to red. Like that. And see, when we leave it, it goes back to the way it was. So that's a hover. And then there's active, which usually means the link you're visiting. So this one is hard to show. It means the link you're actually browsing right now. Okay. And then there's also focus. Focus is usually used in forms. So if you visit a website which has a form, so let's go here. Let's actually focus form CSS. Let's get it from here. The focus. Okay, so right here. So in here, we have an input that has a focus pseudo class, and it's yellow. So that means when we focus means when you click within the input, then it should change the color. So you can see, right? So that means you're actually focused in that input. It usually only works with the forms. So those are pseudo classes. There are more pseudo classes that we can learn, but these are most important ones. Any questions about pseudo classes? And you might use them, you might not use them. So it's good to know how they work, basically. So there's more. This is not the only one. There's also but we're gonna learn more another time if we have time. But let's jump to this. So this is also a pseudo class, but this one is not dynamic pseudo class. So this is more like if you want to target a specific element, and I'm gonna show you a example of this. So there's also different ways of doing this. And we're gonna skip this one, before and after. It's a little bit more, it doesn't come up usually, but you could learn later and investigate that. So that would be kind of like your homework. So let's learn the nth child. What is the nth child? So nth child usually works with like tables. So let's go here. Child CSS. It works with it usually works with like a list or a table. If you have a list or a table, right? So this is a lot of stuff. So let's actually just go back to our example here. Simpler. Let's create a list. Who can help me with the list? Let's create an ordered list. What do we put inside? What is the tag we put inside to create a list? What do we put in here?
li.
Li. Yep. So let's create li. Let's say something like Angelo, because we're Somalis. A list of food. Maloa. And let's say li. I mean, of course, you have to have the breeze and the pasta. Okay. Why did I do pasta there? Okay, I mean li. All right. So we have a list of a couple of items. What do we need? What are we gonna do now? Is we're gonna we want to change the background of these items, right? So the nth child helps us like directly select one, kind of like either even or odd numbers of the list, right? So if we go back here, so it says here the nth child pseudo class allows you to target one or more specific children of parent element. When it says that, it means one of these. So these are children of this element. So this div is just there. We don't even need it really. So this is ul is the parent and the children are the li. So you could select any of these by using the nth child. So the way to select that is you could select I think the most used ones are even and odd. So the way we can select it is by this way. So if you say the nth child and then 2n, that means it's even, right? So let's try that. Let's actually put it here. Let's select ul li. I mean, and then put it right here. It's a pseudo class. Now, if we whatever rule we put here, it's gonna apply to the even ones. So the even means 2 and 4. Those are even. So let's change the background color to yellow. Right? As you can see, it's kind of like dynamic. So you don't have to, like, if you add more to it, more list here, it will still select the even ones. So the even ones are going to be the ones that are going to have that background. If you want to change it to odd, how do we do it? So you guys don't even know it. So let's see. So you just add +1 to make it odd, right? So it's simple as adding I think it's a -1 or +1. I think it's +1. Yeah. So it's +1. So +1 means it's odd, right? So you could just write this in a note somewhere. When you want to select odd, it's nth child 2n +1, right? So this is going back to math and stuff. So we don't want to go deep into it. So that's how you select. So in the future, you guys are going to be making tables of data, things like that. So I want you guys to remember that if you want to select like the odd numbers or the even numbers, this is how you select to change whatever you want to change, right? So that is the nth child. Any question about that? And you could always go back to here as a reference. All right, we're gonna skip the before and after. We're gonna go into style in a form. because I'm also talking about the forms. So before I move on, any questions? I didn't give you enough time, guys. Okay, so let's move on to forms. Okay, so forms are really important in programming. I mean, in web design or web development, forms are essential. Actually, they say that forms were the first things that were created when HTML and CSS were being developed back in the early 90s. The reason for that is form. How do you communicate with the person who owns the website? So the only way to communicate with the person is by form. So let's create a basic form here. Let's get rid of this. Before we do any styling, we're going to start with the HTML. So forms are basically, you just start with the tag form, right? And then you close it with the tag form. Okay, so it's basic as that. And then forms have something called inputs, right? So this will not make any sense if there's no input here. So we start with the input. Input is a tag that you could use to define what you want from the user. So what do you want them to send you? So here we start with the type. So the type is essential. You have to have the type, and then you say the type is equal to text. There are several types. They keep adding new types all the time, but the first one is the text. So if you type here, so you see at the bottom we have a form here. So if we type something, it's a normal text, right? There's also password type. You have seen, so if you type something, it should make it like just dots, right? So that's a password type. There is a number type, and this will force you to have only numbers. So if you type a word, it wouldn't type, but if you type a number, it will type. And it will automatically have this thing that increases the number. There's also a few other ones. There's like an email, which will sometimes work, sometimes doesn't, depending on the browser. So if you type something, there's no way to verify now, but sometimes in the browser, it will force you to have an email. So now if we just type that, and let's see if it says this has to be an email. Yeah, no, it doesn't say that, but I think password and text are the ones that you will use most of the time. So let's say text. There's also a label here. So if we go to here, actually, let's go back. Let's say form CSS. As you can see here, this is a completed one with the name and the first name, and it has a list and all that. So you guys have seen forms everywhere, but let's go here and see one more thing. So there's also label. So label is let's add a label to the one we have. Label is just basically saying, okay, what is this input? So the person doesn't even know what this is. So you could just say label name. I think that's how you spell it. You add a name here. So as you see, it has that. You could put it like that. So you could see. This is one way to define what this input is about. You could also add a placeholder here. You could just say placeholder is equal to name. And that will put a text inside, but when you type, it will go away. So that's another way to do it. A lot of times that's, sometimes it's not good for like readability. There's a whole thing about accessibility. So it's good to put the label at the same time, also having the placeholder too. But it could get redundant, so just keep that in mind. So there's a lot more to learn about label. There's this four is for accessibility. It means you add an ID. So let's do that. Let's go back here. So we create a label here. Let's just undo that. We add a for here. So we say name. So this for is basically designed so that when there's a reading device, it knows like this label is connected to this input. And then the way to connect that is by adding ID here called the same thing as the name, right? So these two are connected now. So if you have a reading device, then it will become a lot easier for it to know, oh, okay, so this label belongs to this input. So that's another thing that for accessibility. But other than that, there's different options. So there's also not only input, but there's also select, which is here. Select creates a list like this you could select from, right? So you can learn that too. But a form without a button will not work. How would you submit this information? So let's add a button. There's two ways to add a button. The first one is just adding a button here and saying submit, and then that's it. So submit, having a button. So that's one way to add it. Another way would be using input. So you could just say input and type will be a submit. Submit. And then the browser will know this is a button, right? It will automatically add a submit to it. Okay. So those are two ways to add it. So yeah, you can learn more about how to create forms. We're going to focus on like styling, but forms have a lot of things. If you go to here and you type form HTML instead of the CSS, because the CSS only focuses on just the styling. But forms have a lot of things. Sometimes you'll see that when we, in the future, when you're creating a website, you'll see when you submit a form, where does it go? Then there's attribute here. Forms have attributes. One of them is action here, and the action is where the data is going to go, where this is going to go. And a lot of times you use a backend language like PHP, so you'll say something like user.php. And then this is a programming language that will take your data and then send it to the database. And it will do like sanitization, which means it will make sure that you're not trying to hack the website. So a lot of times the forms are the most dangerous place for a website. If you have forms on your website, then it's a lot easier to hack than a website that doesn't have form. The reason for that is hackers basically, they add things in here, this input, and whatever you type here, if this is being stored in a database, then that means you could actually write code here. So you could say something like code that says, delete everything in the database. So you could add a code like that. This is just like my pseudo code. This is not a code, but I mean, like, you write a code that gives that instruction and you send it to the database, and the database executes that and says, hey, I have a code here to execute, and then it just deletes everything. Or you could just say, send all the information and the data to this email, and then that's how companies get hacked. So, you know, this is called SQL injection. So it's a cybersecurity thing, but just keep that in mind that in the future, if you're learning about forms, we're going to learn more about them, and you're going to create a lot of forms. Forms have a security issue with them. But this is here's where you get more ways to create a form. You could create a radio selection, which it looks like this. So radio selection is like this. So if you see on like schools, they have multiple choices and stuff like that. So this is where you create multiple choices. This is how you create multiple choices. They have a checkbox, which is like this. So checkbox are multi-selections. And also there is a lot more. So there's a lot more ways. So I'll share that with you guys. Keep that somewhere so that when you're creating a form, then you know what to select. All right, let's go back to what we were doing, which is form CSS. Okay, so how do we style a form, right? So we have this form here. How do we style it? The first thing would be, so let's actually take example from here. The first thing is selection, right? So we need to select specifically what do we want to change. So the form tag has nothing. So it's a parent tag for the elements underneath it, but it's not by itself. You cannot, I mean, you could style it. We could say something like form and then say background, different color. I'm not sure if this is gonna change, but let's try it. Yeah. So form itself, you could select it, but that's not what we want. We want to select, you could add a div on top of the form and then style it that way. Usually you don't add the background to the form, you add a div to it. But if we want to select the input, we could select it this way. So the input, the way to select the input is by going here and saying input, and then you define exactly what the input is. So if it's you could just say input and then just style this. But if you have multiple inputs, so let's say we have a password here, password. We could add a label to it too. And keep in mind, forms are inline. That means they will go right next to each other instead of going to a new line. So to do that, we have to break it br like that. So it goes to a new line. Let's give it this one a password. And also change the here to password. Let's keep it PW. You can name whatever you want here. And then the submit to a new line. All right. So now we have basic form. If you say input, then it will just go to each input. Let's change the border to 2 pixels solid, right? So as you can see, it selected all inputs, and even our submit button is input, so it selected everything. So you have to specify exactly which input are you talking about, right? So let's delete this. Okay, so right here, as you can see, you define which one you want. So let's do that. So you go here and you say type is equal to text. So we're only selecting the one that's text right here, right? And then you go ahead and define your rules here. You could go here as an example. So let's just copy this. So we could add more rules. So these rules are basically saying make it 100% width because it's too big. Padding, margin, display, inline, border radius. So border radius is basically the curve around it. You see there's a little bit of curve. If you increase the border radius, then it will become more circular or oval. So if we say 10, see, as you can see, it becomes a little more 50. See? So as you can see, if you want to make it look like that, that's how you make it the border radius. And the box sizing is basically the two inputs or the elements don't mix, they don't overlap, basically. You could also say here, you could add more here. So if you want to select other things, you could add. So you could add actually new input here and just say something like you only want to select the password one, right? So now it's going to select only the password and what did I miss here? Okay. Oh, okay. So I think we can add it here. Let's go back here. I think it might not work like that. We could create a new line for that, so that's fine. I think you could add other things like select, but for inputs, I think you have to create a new one. You have to say input, input type is equal to password. I'm sure you could add to it. Let's see. I think you could say comma type. Let's try that. It's fine to forget things in programming. You don't have to memorize everything. Let's try this. That's not working either. Okay, let's try type password. Yeah, so as you can see, we just got it in a, just trying different things, but this is also one way to add it to, by just adding comma and then another type. So this is kind of like the way you style it. There's more to it than the eye meets. So I would say just practice more and you will get the hang of it. Any questions about forms? And remember, you could also add the focus. So we could just say, so when we focus, we want to change to something. So we could say input, we could say input focus, or we could say background light blue, something like that, or background color. You could say both background or background color. So now when you click it, it changes the background, makes it easier for some people. Any questions? All right, so forms, that's forms for us. Let's take a break and come back for Flexbox. And then when we finish Flexbox, we're gonna go to Git. Actually, we're gonna go to responsive web design, which is basically what Flexbox helps us with. So yeah, we're gonna finish that, and then after that, we have the Git, and we're gonna learn. So we have a lot to cover. So let's take a break. Let's take 10 minutes, and then get back. Go get your coffee, a chef, whatever, and let's take a break. All right, so we're gonna get back to so we're gonna start with Flexbox. What is Flexbox to start with? So Flexbox, or CSS Flexbox layout module. Actually, that was the name of it. We just shortened it for Flexbox. It's a layout mode used almost exclusively in responsive websites that provides for better arrangement of all the pages elements that behave in predictable mode. So basically what this is saying is, before we had Flexbox, and also there's CSS grids, there's several technologies that help us with kind of like layout. It was really hard to lay out a website. So if we search something like website layout, let's say old, it was always hard to lay things out. So when we're talking about layout, it basically means where everything is and how things are related to each other, how to group things. It was always difficult. People have to write like a ton of CSS to make it work. And then when you try to make it responsive, or you could use it for mobile or different tabs, different tablets, then it becomes a nightmare. It becomes really difficult to like manage how things are and how things react. So that's why CSS added something called Flexbox. It's part of the CSS, so it's not something you have to install or anything. It's just in CSS. It's already in CSS. And this is not the only way to do it. There's also CSS grids, or just grid layout. This is also another way to do it. If you like doing CSS grid, this is another way to do it. But we're gonna learn Flexbox. I think it's a little bit easier to learn than CSS grids, but it's the same technology. I mean, it's the same idea. So yeah, you can easily create layouts for complex applications and web pages. Unlike floats, Flexbox layout gives you complete control. So before Flexbox, before these technologies of how to lay out a website easily, we had you have to use floats. So you have to float things to the right. So there's actual CSS element called float CSS. So float to the right, float to the left, and then you have to adjust things to fit each other, right? Okay. Most properties of CSS perform one action based on their values. For example, if you use color in CSS, you could provide a value like red. So basically, that's kind of like they're comparing that to CSS, to Fluxbox. But how does Fluxbox work? So let's see an example of how it works. So let's get rid of our form here. Let's get rid of the CSS here. So let's start with a general div. Okay. And then let's create two boxes. We just want to create a box, right? So this box, we're just going to say div. And let's just close that div. Let's give this one an ID, or you could give it a class if you want, but let's give it an ID of box1. Let's give this a div ID of box2. Right? Simple box. So you're not gonna see anything now, but we're gonna create it in CSS. So if we say ID of box1, let's give it a pattern of, and also let's just add something to say box1. Let's add this box2. Okay, so we can see something here, right? Let's give it a padding of 30 pixels. 30 pixels. What am I doing? 30 pixels. Background color of blue. And let's give it, so we're just setting up right now. We're not doing anything, we're doing just setup. And then let's make it, yeah, so background that, and then let's say color white. We just want to make the text white and font size a little bit bigger, 18 pixels or something like that. It doesn't matter. Actually, it doesn't matter the font size. Okay, so we're just gonna do the same thing for box 2, but we're just gonna change the background color to let's say something. This one's too bright, so let's dim it down to something like light blue. Let's give this one green, light green, maybe. I don't know. Oh, this box 2. Okay. So I think it's way too bright. I don't know, these colors gonna work for us. Let's give this one orange. Orange is way too bright too. Let's give it black. And then yeah, I think that's better. Okay, so now we have two boxes. So these two boxes are div, and div is a block element. Who remembers when we talked about display? What is a block? What is a block element? Who remembers the last lesson? So in CSS, a block element, it means it's gonna take the whole width of the page, right? It's just gonna fill everything. It's not gonna leave anything for this one. If we actually change it to the display here to inline, so for the first one, as you can see, it just took as much in as much as it needed, and then it just gave the rest to the next line, to the next thing. So we could change this one to display inline, and that will also take as much as it needs to take. I don't know why they went all the way up, but it's not a big deal. Let's add some margin. That 10 pixels of margin. Is that 10 this one too? Okay. So as you can see, it's not even 10. Let's add like 2. As you can see, they're right next to each other and they're inline right now, right? So imagine you have like a lot of them, right? If you have a lot of them, then what happens is you're not gonna have what's gonna happen is it's just not gonna go to the next line, right? So by default, it's a block, so it's filling out everything. So what we want to do is we want to change it to flexbox, right? So instead of selecting each one of them and adding a display of inline, well, you could do that. That's one way to do it. And then when you fill out, then you say, okay, don't go over the limit. You're gonna disable that. So that's all the way of doing it. The new way of doing it is we're just gonna add a class here. You're just gonna add a box here, and then we're gonna target. So the way Flexbox works is it only targets these 2 elements. It only targets the child element. So if you have something inside the child element, the Flexbox will not know about that, right? So let's say box here. And all we need to do now is just add display flex. That's all we need to do, right? We don't have to add an inline to each one of them or align them and all that stuff. We don't have to do none of that. And if we add more, it will be the same. Let's add more. Let's actually give them all the same. No, we can't give them the same thing. But it's not a big deal. So let's just add that like that. As you can see, so this would be 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So that's what the Flexbox helps us with, is by just adding a display flex. It's going to make everything inline, but not only inline, it's going to add more to it so that when it reaches to the side, it will float to the left side. Okay. So let's make it, and also I'm going to share this with you guys. This website. This website gives you more information of how Flexbox works. As you can see right now, what we did right now is we created a container. So this is the background, is the container, and you have 3 elements or 3 items. And Flexbox only targets these 3. It doesn't. If you have something inside one of them, it will not target it. And then you have directions. So directions help us with how we direct things. So if we say here, if we add flex direction, if we say column, then that means it's going to become a column. So it's going to go back the way it was before. If by default it's a row, so that's why we saw this way, because display flex by default is a row. Let's delete this. We'll learn. We'll get to know more about that later. It's the homework. And then there's order. There is, so another thing is the flex wrap. So you could add a flex wrap to it so that when you don't have enough space. Right now, let's see. Where is it? Why do we have this? Okay, this is let's move this back. Okay. So right now, when you make it smaller, is when you don't have enough space. Let's make it small. As you can see, it doesn't go to the next line, right? So let's remove this and say flex. I think it's called flex wrap. Yep, flex wrap. And then we're just going to say, you could either say no wrap if you don't want to wrap. Wrap means basically just go to the next line, or you could say wrap here. So let's do that. Wrap. Okay. So now if we make it smaller, you see it goes to the next line by default. Right? By default, it goes to the next line. I think I should change the orientation like that. I think that's a lot easier. So we can just play around like that. Okay. So as you can see, it knows that the screen is smaller, so it goes to the next line, which is very useful when it comes to like responsiveness. There's money properties you could add. There's flex grow, which will which we're not gonna learn now, but it helps. I mean flex flow, not grow. There's flex grow too, but flex flow is shorthand for column and wrap. There's justify content. This one is the one I use the most, right? So let's say you want a, let's move all this to the back because they're not part of the lesson. Let's say you want to you don't have all this, you only have like 3 of them, and this one is the one that that you guys were struggling with in the homework. So we only have 3 of them. We want to like fill out the whole space, right? So we want to like give them a basically a space between them that is equal space. So to do that, all we have to add is the justify content. As you see, justify content has multiple ways of doing it. So the one we want is space between. So it fills out the space between, and then it takes out the whole space. So justify content, let's copy that. And then let's say space between. And that will fill out the space. I see there's questions. Which one did you use for the restaurant page? So yeah, the restaurant page I use this. So I actually used I think I used a space around, but you could say space between. So a space between, for example, here, let's actually change this to, we'll come back, let me copy it. Let's change this to the like the restaurant. So you have like H1 here, Fatima, let's just say Fatima only for now. And then you have H1, and here you have the navigation, you have nav, and nav. Let's add maybe 2 of them. So you have a href equal to that, and then let's say home, a, and then you have a href, and then you have contact, let's say. Okay, so you have these 2. Now we already have the display flex, right? Where it's already part of it. But before it was like this. So it was like that. So it was like right underneath each other. So if we add a display flex, that means they go right next to each other. But then now they're right next to each other. Like there's no space. So that's when we add that's when we add this, the justify content. There's also another one. There's that one, but yeah. So let's add 2 of them. If you have 6, how can you get 3 top and 3 bottom using for Xbox? Okay, I'll get to that question. Give me a second. So let's add this justify content. Let's add a space between. So a space between means fill out the space between these 2, right? And then what I did was I also added another one, which is this one right underneath this one. It's called align items. This one does it's a vertical one. So instead of justify content is a horizontal, as you can see, it aligns everything horizontally. Align items aligns everything vertically. So it aligns vertically. So right now, the problem we have right now is like this navigation is at the top and Fatima is at the bottom. So just to change that, you just add align item, and then I think we say center, and that centers everything. So you see. So that's it. That's it. I just added only these 3. Right. Let's go back. Okay, if you have 6 boxes, how can you get top 3? Okay. So what I was doing actually here was I was just moving this, and Flexbox was doing the work. I wasn't doing anything magical about it. So I'll show you. Let's go back to the box. Okay, so I wasn't doing anything. The Fluxbox does that whole thing. It calculates the space that it has, and then it does it automatically. So you don't have to even think about it. Any other question? Let me see if I covered most of the stuff. Okay, so yeah, so flex direction, flex wrap, flex flow is a combination of flex direction and flex wrap. Okay, I think I covered all that. But the thing is, I always go back to this website. I literally don't even like remember some. I remember like the flex direction, and most of the time justify content and align item. But if I want to do more stuff, then I just go back to this website. So I'll share this with you. Book Market, it's the best website. Complete guide for. It's basically just a place you could use to kind of like go back all the time, even when you have a job or working as a developer. Any question about Flexbox? And it takes time to like get it. It's a little bit hard to understand it at the beginning, but the more you practice it, the easier it comes. I think the one thing to remember, like if you forget everything, the one thing to remember is always add. If you have two items, this is the only thing I'll say. Maybe write a note somewhere. If you have two items, add the Fluxbox on the parent item or parent element, right? So either use class, it doesn't matter how you target it. But if you add a Fluxbox here, this will not do anything for Fluxbox. Like it will not affect this one. It would only affect the children of this item if it has a children, right? So this is the thing that confuses people. Is like they add Fluxbox everywhere or display Flux, and then they're like, well, it's not working. What happened? Well, you have to add to the parent one. And if you don't have parent, if it's like this, if you have two items like this, you cannot add Fluxbox because there's no parent item, parent element. Just keep that in mind. Any other question you guys have about the Fluxbox? Okay. All right. If there's no question, let's conclude. Before we move to Git, let's move to website responsive design. On what this is, basically. All this we're learning right now, what we learned, Fluxbox, all the things we learned, comes down to responsive web design. So back in the day, when websites were like 90s and early 2000s, the problem was there was no, it's not a problem, but there was no, like, people were not using phones to browse websites, right? So after 2007, I would say, I think when the iPhone came out, and sorry for people using Android, but I think when iPhone came out, that's when like the adoption started mostly, right? I feel like that's because a lot of people started using iPhones, and iPhone gave people a way to browse websites, and then people, and then it was harder to browse websites. So I don't know if I can show you any image or anything, but back in the day, let's see, mobile website before 2007. Let's see if we can see image. Yeah, so if you guys remember, this is how it used to look like if you want to browse a website. Yeah, this is also another way to browse. Do you guys remember that? Yeah, it was bad. It was really bad to browse a website back in the day. So developers, they realize people are adopting mobile. And also right now, actually, there's more mobile use on websites than desktop. There's more people browsing websites on their mobile than so if you say percentage mobile versus desktop, so there's over 68% of the people that browse websites use mobile to browse. So it's really important for the website to be responsive. So when we say responsive, what exactly do we mean by that? Let's go to an example I gave before, which was we go to like GitHub, and if we go to my profile, and we will learn GitHub. This is our next lesson. So this is my profile on GitHub. If we inspect this actually I did this before. If we inspect this in the browser, it has a way to inspect as a mobile, right? So if you want to preview as a mobile, you could click this little icon here, and then it will bring up, it will make the website smaller, and it will give you options here to browse which device you want. So you could browse by iPhone 12. So you could also make it closer so you could see a little bit better. So your website is going to look like this in iPhone 12 Pro or any Android, other Samsungs, any phone, Samsung Galaxy. It's like this. So if something is wrong, then that means it's the problem. The problem is responsiveness. If we go back to responsiveness, this will help us kind of like scale down, scale up. You will see, keep eye on like how the website looks like the more we change, right? So right now it has this, this is called a hamburger menu because it looks like a hamburger. Hamburger menu, it means the menu of the website is hidden. So if you click it, it comes up, and you guys will learn how to do this in the future. So, and you guys have seen it when you're using your phone, the menu is always like this. But if we expand it and make it bigger, there's going to be a point, and keep this in mind. Like this is the width of the website right here. It's 565 right now. Things are going to change the more the more this gets bigger. Just keep in mind, like keep eye on that. So let's make it bigger now. 731. Something changed. So by 737, 67, the website changed from no menu here to a menu and navigation, and also this picture is bigger and there's more stuff, you see? And then if we go back, things are stacked, see? So if we make it a little bit bigger, things are like some on the right, some on the left, all that. So this is called responsiveness. And so the more you go make it smaller, the more things just disappear or get smaller or become vertical. Basically, you stack things on top of each other. And this is what we're going to learn how to do today. So you see things are disappearing, coming up. So there's different ways of doing that. So there is a fixed layout, which is exactly like the way we're doing right now, the old way, like 1990s. Means like there's nothing changes. It's fixed layout. The website will not change. It doesn't matter how you make it smaller. There's also fluid layout, which is what we're doing right now on here. This is fluid, right? But it's not just fluid. It actually also changes something. So this is one way. So we're not going to do fluid. Fluid means you use things like percentage. So 90%, 98%. And then that will automatically change the website, but things will just get smaller or bigger. That's it. Things will not change. Like the navigation will not disappear. Nothing happens. Things will just get smaller. The problem for this is the images will get too small or too big. So one of those. So that's not what we're targeting. There's also adaptive layout, which is using media query, or we're going to learn what that is. But this is also a good way to design it, but it's not the best way. So what we're targeting is using all those concepts and creating something called responsive layout. So we're going to combine all those. We're going to combine the fixed, the adaptive, and the fluid layouts to create a fully responsive website that adapts to any device, not only phones, but also tablets, also watches. So right now we actually have like watches. So if you want people to browse your website from a watch, then you need to do something about it, right? Any question about that? That's just overview, and we're gonna see how to do it. Any question? I'm sorry if I'm giving you guys too much information. I want you guys to understand, like, this is like the most important part. There's actually people who get jobs just for designing a responsive websites. I work as a software developer in our company. They actually have, there's a lady that works with us, and all she does is work with CSS. So her job is to come in, write the CSS, write the responsive website, and we take that and like give it like functionalities and program it. So and she gets paid as much as us. So there's nothing. She's a developer. So if you learn this, you could get a job just for this. If you have more skills like programming and all that, it helps because you get more opportunities. But this is really important, responsive web design. Any question before we move to examples? All right. So yeah, so let's move on. Let's learn media queries. What are they? What is media query? So let's actually search that. Media query, CSS. Okay. Let's actually go to a descriptive place. Okay. Media queries are ways to target the browser by certain characteristics. So let's say we want to target just the mobile, right? Let's say we want to target just mobile, and I'm just writing it, not here. Let's write it here. I'm just writing it as an example. So let's get rid of this whole thing. Let's get rid of this too. So let's say we want to write a media query, and media query is basically a way to target certain devices. So if you want to target a mobile, this is how you write the mobile. So you just say @media, and then there's different ways to do it. So we could actually go back here and get an example from here. There's different ways to do it. You could target all screens. So if you say only screens here, this means it's not going to target print. And when I say print, I mean like when you print in the website, actually, when you right click it and print it, you could create a different layout for this, by the way. So you see it's a little bit different than this. So what we could do is you could say print and then create and say, okay, so max width 500. So when the max width is 500 for the print, then you write your CSS here. You write CSS rules. But right now we're not focusing on print. We're going to focus on screen, which is all screens. So you could just say, instead of all screens, you could just say all here. All and. So all and you have to write it like that. But browsers are smart, so you don't need to write this. You could just leave it like that. You could target a specific device. Let's see. They have it here. You could target a specific device. You could say something like a mobile here. But we're not going to target right now that. So you could just write just media query and then max width. So max width, basically it's saying everything up basically above 500. That's what it's saying. So let's say something like background color. Actually, we have to give it element here. We have to say something like body. No, actually, we could just say body here. It doesn't need that. It already knows that. Background color. Let's say green. Okay. So now nothing happens, but let's change the, let's make it smaller. So when we reach, so the max width, so when the screen, the max width of this screen, when it reaches 500. So right now, if you look at the bottom, it's counting down to 500. So when we reach 500, the background changes to green. And that's the magic of media query, basically. There's also, you could also say min width. That's the one we're going to focus. This one, the min width, is a mobile first design. That means this is going to target, it's going to say us. So it's going to say basically make everything normal, like white. But when you reach 500, then apply this, right? The one before that was basically everything is fine until you go down and reach 500. This one is everything is fine until you go up and reach 500. That's the difference. Then apply that. And that's the one we're going to focus today, is by everything is normal until we reach 500. Okay. That's media query, basically. Like you could actually write the body here too. Say body, background color blue, right? And if we go down, you see that the background color changes at 500. So by default, it's blue. But then when we reach 500 and we go up, then that means it changes to green. Any question about media query and what it is, what it does? Any question? You guys can hear me, right? Okay.
Duran, what other usage does it have other than bad usage kala malahan?
No, you could add as many CSS rules as you want to hear. You could like have all the CSS. So if you, let's say we have here on H2 test title, H2, right? Let's say the H2 by default is, let's actually write here. H2 by default is color is white, right? By default. And also the background is green by default. No, actually the background is blue by default, right? So we want to change when we reach 500, we want to change the H2. So we say H2 color to whatever, orange, right? So now it's white by default right here, and the background is blue by default. When we reach 500, the background is going to change to green, and then the title is going to change to orange, right? Like that. So this means you could apply any CSS rule or you could target any element. And then if you want to change that element, remember on here, basically the navigation was coming up when we reached 767. That means that's what they did. They did media query 767, make the navigation appear after that. That's literally what they did. And I can actually show you that in their CSS. Although this website is huge and is owned by Microsoft and it's like multi-million company, we could just target it, and you guys learn the same thing. Let's target the navigation. Let's go here. Let's target this whole header section. If we go down here, this is the right side is the CSS, and now if we make this appear, you will see it might be a little more nuance of the way they did it, but it's exact same concept. It's basically making things disappear. And I can show you actually how to make things disappear by example here. So let's say we want to make the title disappear after 500. So when it reaches 500. So instead of changing it to orange, we could just say display none. So now if we reach 500, the title's gone. It's very nice to use this. It helps you like organize your website, design for mobile, make things disappear, make things show things, all that. Any question about this? And we're going to see it in example. We're going to build a whole thing with it. Okay, no questions. Okay, yeah. So the more you use it, the easier it gets as usual. But understand that media query is designed for mobile or tablets, so you can make your website responsive. So one thing we could do right now is we could build a project, but let's actually learn Git with the building that project itself. Yes. So yeah, Fatih, exactly. So make things disappear and magically. Yeah. So let's learn a little bit about Git. And when we learn Git, then we're gonna build a project. We're gonna have a really nice small project we're gonna build together. We don't have a lot of time. So we're definitely gonna go over the time, maybe like 20 minutes, max maybe 30 minutes. So let's learn Git. Don't forget the media queries and all that because we're gonna build this with a website. But first we have to learn Git. The reason we're learning Git and what is Git anyways? First, so let's start with that. Hopefully you guys watch this video. Make sure before we even start the class, make sure maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour is spent watching this video and spend reading, right? It will make it 100 times easier for you to understand what I'm talking about. And you will get it basically because you already understand a little bit, and then I'll fill out the spaces where you have confusion about. So yeah, so always read ahead. Just read maybe an hour before the class, maybe 30 minutes before the class, whatever time you have. All right, what is Git? Okay, so imagine you're working with a team, right? Developers working together, right? You're working on a bigger project, okay? Your boss gave you you guys are collaborating, you guys working on a project, and then you send your code and you say, okay, this is my changes. And then another developer changed a little bit of where exactly the place you changed. But now you have issue because how do you combine those two things, right? How do you know what that developer changed and how do you know what you changed and how does that work? Another thing is, let's say you change your code and the boss said, okay, modify it. And you modify it and then you modify it multiple times. And then the boss said, you know what? Actually, let's go back to the original one you started with. And now you're like screwed. You don't know where to go back to, like what to do. So that's when they, developers or engineers, they thought about something called Git. Git is a technology that helps you control your code. It's a version control technology. Think of it as like, in Microsoft Word, when you write a document, you save it, right? And then you make a little changes and then you save it. And then you make a little changes, you save it. And then if you want to go back, right now, actually, Microsoft Word and other technologies, they have like a history of what you changed. Google Docs have that too. They have a history of what you changed. It's exactly the same idea. It means like it's going to keep track of the changes you made. And then you could go back to a specific place, right? So that's what Git is. Git is not like a programming language. So it's just a technology that you can install to your computer. If you have Windows, I'll say go to this website. Go to this website and then download, let's say, Git Bash. So before we actually go to Git Bash, hopefully you guys understand what Git is. It's just technology software that is built in Mac computers. So you don't even have to think about it in Mac computers. But if you have Windows, then I would say download this Git Bash terminal. And this terminal has, I'll share this with you. So it's basically a terminal technology. And a lot of times people are scared of terminals. Like they're scared of like how terminals look like and what they are. But I would say like at the end of the day, it's just another technology you have to learn. I was scared of terminals and like command lines at the beginning, but now, like, not even now, like a week after, I was fine with it. So what is terminal? So terminal is if you have a Mac, just go to here and write terminal. And then there's actually an app for that in Mac. Let me actually close mine. Terminate process, all that. Okay, let's reopen it. Okay, so if you have a Mac, you already have it built in like this. And this looks scary now, but believe me, it will become a lot easier when I explain it. And it's just literally just typing a couple of commands and that's it. And it's not like, you don't have to be, a programmer or anything or a hacker to type things here. Don't worry about it. I'll teach you a couple of commands to type, and you only need to know those commands, like maybe 5-6 commands, and that's it. You don't need to know how to like hack things and all that stuff, right? So don't be scared of it. If you have Windows, go to this website, Git the website, and then download it, and it will have something called Git Bash, right? So let's go here, Git Bash. Git Bash. So it's gonna look like this. For Windows, it's gonna look like this. I'm not sure if anyone has Windows. Most people here, they have Mac. If you have Windows, this is what it's gonna look like. It's gonna be the same idea, but it's gonna have a place to type, right? That's all you need. Keep in mind that if you have Windows, the command prompt of Windows is not a Git friendly, so it will not work. So you have to download this Git Bash thing. Okay. So now we have this, and we know what Git is. It's a way to control or manage your code, right? We need to show an example of that, right? So let's actually create an example. So let me go to your files. So let's create something here. And also before I actually create, let's actually use the terminal to create things, right? Let's learn a couple of commands. And also these commands, you can write them down and then refer back to them, right? So if you want to go, if you want to know where you're at, imagine you were dropped in the middle of like a city that you have no idea, and you're like in a mall or something. The first thing you want to know is where you're at, right? So in the terminal, that's the first thing you want to know is where you're at. So a way to know is there's a command called ls. You just type ls. That's it. Let me zoom it in. ls means list. So write that down. ls means list. I have to type every time I go get. So is it one time or? What do you mean by Mohammed by that? ls. So if you type ls and hit enter, it will give you like a list of things. So right now, basically what it's telling us is you're in this folder, which has all these documents or folders. Some of the folders you guys can see, there's a document, there's like downloads, that, pictures, that. So you could navigate to any of them. Right now, our file is in pictures, and then it's in GIT, and then it's in another folder. As you can see here, it's in, So we want to navigate there. We want to go there. How do we go there? There's another command, and I'll write down these commands for you guys so you don't have to worry about it. So there's a command called cd. cd means change directory, and this is how you navigate to another folder. So we want to navigate to pictures, and you have to write exactly the way it looks like. It has to be capital P. So we just write pictures. You could write it out, or you could just write a pic and have like a unique name, and then hit tab on your keyboard, and it will fill out for you, right? You can either type it out or just do that. Those two options. Hit enter. As you can see now, we're inside pictures. And then you could say ls again. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff here. I know where I'm going, but you kind of have to know your computer. You have to know what files you have in your computer and all that stuff. So I'm going to go to cd GIT, and that's the folder. If I say ls, we'll have all the GIT school projects and stuff. We want to go to this folder called PLUS01. So let's go to that cd, and also it has to be spelled exactly, like it's all capitalized. PLUS01. Oh, you could also write plus, but right now if you just say p and hit tab, it will tell you, hey, there's like 3 things that start with p. You can't just do that. So you have to specify exactly what do you want. So if I say plus, then as you can see here, there's only one plus here. It's written like that, and this is not what we want. We want the plus, everything capitalized. So we're gonna say plus like that, and then now it knows, okay, there's only one plus, and it sends you there. And you could just say ls. We have 2 things: assignments and lessons. We want to go to lessons, and then ls. And as you can see, we're here, week 2. Let's go to week 2. ls. There's 2 things, and that's all we wanted. That's where we're at right now, right? Sorry about this. Where did it go? Crashed or something? What happened? Yeah. So that's where we're at right now, right here. You could ask questions. You could send me a message if you guys are confused about anything I'm writing. And I'll write down these commands for you. So I'll leave it as a note in the channel. Okay, good question. How do I go back? That's a good question. So let's say we go into like a folder that we didn't want it. So let's say we go to lecture projects, and we're like, oh no, like I don't want to be here. Let's go back. So you just say cd ... cd ... will help you go back. Right? We went back. cd ... Okay. So that's another command. So I'm just telling you guys, there's like maybe 10, maybe 12 commands. That's all you need to know to do this whole thing, right? So don't be worried about like the terminal. It's not like you're not breaking anything because you're not typing crazy stuff. Like a lot of people are worried about like typing a bunch of commands and then breaking the computer. Of course, the terminal is like, it's like your folder. So this folder is exactly the same as this terminal, right? Exact the same. So if you delete this, if you say right click delete or move it to trash, it's the same as deleting here. So some other commands would be, let's say we want to create a file. So if you want to create a file here, you could just say new folder. We could create a here new folder too. So a way to create a new folder would be mkdir. Mkdir is make directory. That's what it stands for. It's like a shorter version. Make directory or make folder, and then you just type the name of the folder, test folder. If you look here, there's supposed to be a test folder. What happened? Are we in the wrong place? Okay, week 2. Sorry. Test folder here. You have a folder, and you create it with a terminal. You could delete. I think it's called. Here's the thing: you're not gonna remember all the commands. I don't remember how to delete a folder. I think it's remove dir or something like that. rm dir, and then you say text folder. Yeah, and then you say ls. You don't have to keep looking at the folder here all the time, right? So yeah, that's how you do it. So let's create another folder right now. mkdir. Let's say let's call it something like project. So we wanna make it so that we can practice with this. So project 202. Let's say 02 for week 2. Okay, ls, and then right there we have. Let's cd into that. And that's like a programmer language. cd into it. It means go into the folder, right? We want to create other files. How do you create like a HTML file? So you say touch. Touch is another command. It means create And then you usually use this to create files. So we say index.html. Now, if we go to that folder, project 02, there's going to be a folder, index.html. It's a magic, I know. You are a hacker right now, basically. So you're learning hacking stuff. So, and then you could create more. You could delete that file by saying, I think it's called rm index.html. Go back, it's not there. Right? It's magic. So these commands are really important. So those are called those are Linux commands, right? What we just use are Linux command. In computer technology learning, all that, you will come there's different operating like Windows, and there's Mac, and then there's Linux, right? So those are the three of them. Most people don't use Linux. I think that's how it's spelled. OS, Linux operating system. It's used by like, actually that's not how it's spelled. It's used by like hackers, and like it's really good. It's like one of those like very advanced like technologies. And Mac and Windows are actually based on Linux, right? Linux has technologies that no other systems have. And also it's actually developed by like one guy in like 1990s. But now it's actually maintained by a lot of people, but it's free, it's open source. Linux is open source. And it's kind of like the opposite of like Windows. And there's a history, like you could watch a whole documentary about the fight between Microsoft and the Linux people. Linux is created by an engineer, so it's like open source, and Microsoft is like corporation. And there was a fight between like making everything free and open source and creating a softwares, proprietary softwares. So there was a huge fight about that. But Linux is kind of like the base for everything. So if you see like rocket ships and everything, they all run it on Linux because it's very safe and very good. So Linux, if you like Linux right now, it's like a Windows basically. But Linux by default is you have to use terminal, right? You have to navigate between folders using terminal. You see this in like movies and stuff. So that's where this came from. These commands we're using right now, that's where it came from. But we're not doing all that like fancy stuff. We only want to navigate between folders and stuff. That's what we want to do. So those are Linux. So I'm gonna try to write them down here. So I'm gonna write them down, but I'm gonna give them more description later. So these are, I don't even know how to spell Linux. L-I-N. Okay, yeah. Linux commands. So Linux commands are things like cd, ls, rm, rmdir, things like that. And the other ones we did. So these are Linux, and I'll give you more description later. Then there is Git commands. Git commands. And we're going to learn that now. Git commands are things like Git. You always have to say Git status, and there's more. And I'll add more to that. So I'm just putting there. I'm showing the two different things. There's Linux commands and there's Git commands. And we learn what Git is. Git is a technology that's already built. It's in your computer if you have a Mac. If you don't have a Mac, then you have to use Git bash. So if we say Git status, right, it's going to say, oh, sorry, this repository. When it says repository, it means folder, basically. This folder is not a Git folder. So you cannot use Git. So you have to like make the folder a Git folder. And the way to do that is by just typing Git init. That means the folder we're in right now, this one, the project 02, we're going to make it a Git. We're going to add it to the Git system. So that means any change that's made is going to be tracked by Git automatically. So when we do that, it says initializing empty Git, and also it's going to add a hidden thing here. So if you say shift, I think it's called, I'm not sure. No, Yeah, there's a hidden folder here. I'm not sure how to show it right now. Yeah. Okay, let's actually always open. Where is it? Yeah, in Windows, it's a little bit easier to show the hidden folders. But yeah, there's a hidden folder called git.git in here. So it keeps track of any changes. I'll show you how it keeps track of changes. I'm sorry, guys, I'm just throwing you a lot of technologies. You also have to download a editor. You have to download VS Code. VS Code is a Visual Studio Code. It's an editor. So download this. And I think I mentioned it in the beginning of the class last week. Install that in your computer. It's a visual editor. So let's actually open that in my computer. I already have something open with it, so never mind. Let's go back to here. Actually, there's a way to open it. If you have a Mac, it's a little bit easier. If you have Windows, I think you have to add it yourself. You can say code dot, and it will open the editor. Actually, it doesn't open it for me. Never mind. I didn't enable it. All right, let's actually close it and open it. Okay, so this is different project. So I'm gonna move it somewhere else. So let's open a new one. Windows. Okay. So here's a visual editor. So this is VS Code. This is how it looks like when you open it first. Okay, no problem. All right, Fortune, take care. All right. So visual editor, basically it looks crazy right now, but all you need to know is you could just open a new file. So it's just like your text editor in your computer. All computers have like a text editor. So if you say text editor, you'll have something like this. I'm not sure, or TextPad in Windows. So, but this one is a little more advanced. It has more things, right? So let's open that folder that we just created. And the easiest way to open it is by just dragging that folder to Visual Editor here, VS Code. So right now there's nothing. It pops up all this stuff and it gives you this start, but there's nothing in here. So let's create, and also it keeps right here. I have something like the tree. This is the Git. This is Git in my VS Code. You could actually install that. Git has VS Code has extensions, so it's like apps you could install. Okay, so you could install this Git, but don't worry about that. You don't have to have that right now. So let's actually create a file here in this folder. So let's say touch index.html. We created that. Okay. So now let's actually say git status to check the status of what changed. So you can see it gives us more information. It says you are in a branch called master. So branches in the Git means it's like it creates branch for everything, right? So the main branch is called master, although right now they change it to main, right? This is the old terminology. They actually changed it to main because they had a problem with the master, because some people complained and said it has another connotation. So this is the main branch. So think of it as like a tree, right? So think of it as like a tree. So if we go here, git branches, they look like a tree, like that. So this is the master within right now. You could create your own branch. So remember, I was talking about like developers working together. You could create your own branch, add something to it, and then bring it back to the main one, right? So once everyone agrees on your changes and they're like, okay, good, your changes are great. Now let's add it back to the master. But you're not gonna add it back here at the beginning of the changes. You're gonna add it after other people added some changes. You're gonna add yours. So that's the main reason for branches. So right now it's telling us, hey, there's something that you're not tracking. You're not tracking this index. So let's track that. So to track it, you have to say git add, right? And then you have to tell the file name index.html. But there's easier way. So let's say if you have multiple changes, so let's create more here actually. Let's say touch styles.css. So now if we say git status, you have two files. So it would be tedious to like say touch add, git add the file name and then the file name. Instead, you could just say a dot, right? A dot with a space in front of it means track everything that's the changes. So now it's gonna keep track of those changes. So if we say git status, you will see that it says, oh, there's new changes you made. And there's this DS folder thing. Don't worry about that. That is part of like the Mac. It's nothing to do with us. So you have two files that you haven't committed. So in Git, there's something called commit. It means, okay, you want to commit these changes. You want to make these changes real. So you could commit them. So the way to commit them is by saying git commit. And then you have to give a comment. You have to say, okay, I'm committing, but what did I change, right? So you have to say M for message, right? I want to add a message. So you always have to say, you can't just say commit. It will ask you, hey, you want to add message or something to it? You have to say something like, you could say the first commit. So this is the first commit. Or you could just say a little more descriptive and say, I added as added index.html and styles.css. And then it has to be quoted. It has to have quotes around it. And that's it. You just say done. And now it says, oh, good. Now that means your changes are committed. It means like those changes are ready to be sent. But now, like those changes are in the main right now. So if we say git status, those changes are in the master branch right now. So that's a problem because we don't want to like keep adding to the master branch. We want to create our own branch. And there's a way to create it. But before we do that, let me like stop for a second and ask if you have any question about what are we doing right now. So like git and all these commands, I'll give you all the commands and I'll give you a description of what each one does. So you don't have to like keep remembering them. Any question? Yeah, and I know this is a lot of information, but you have a whole week to figure it out. So I would say just space yourself out. Don't wait for the last day. So I would say like just the first day, like Monday, maybe review like what do you want to, what you learned? Maybe watch the video again, or maybe just go and like Google things and learn. And then the second day, maybe try to like understand what Git is and just space yourself out. Otherwise, it will just become too much if you do it in like 1 or 2 days. Is there a cheat sheet for Git and terminal? There's a cheat sheet. Yeah. So there's let's go here. Let's say Git cheat sheet. Yeah, there's a lot of cheat sheets. So this cheat sheet, the thing about some of the cheat sheets is like they give you way too much information. They give you commands that you don't even need most of the time. So I'm gonna try to find one that's a little more concise, so you don't get overwhelmed. I don't have one right now specifically. There's this one, so you can see it gives you like over here, git status, git add, git different. See, this is, you don't need this one right now. Git reset, all that stuff, you don't need it. So that's why the thing is, I don't want you guys feel you have to learn all these technologies. It will come in time. You just like, I don't even know all the commands myself, and I've been using it for years. So it's a matter of just like kind of like using what you need instead of like everything, right? So don't feel overwhelmed. Everything is going to be written, and then you're just going to use the ones that you need. And also, I'm going to give you steps of how to do this, right? So you can do it yourself. Okay, so now we have we know how the Git works, but where do we send this code to? Like, how do you submit the code, right? Or how to open? Okay, you have to look for, if you don't have you have to look for terminal here. If you don't have it here, then I think we have to Google that. I'm not sure. I've never had that. Terminal on Mac. Yeah, I think if you type terminal, it will just come out. It's there by default. So that's what they say in here. It's also in the folder applications, utilities. So if you go to your folders, you go to applications, utilities at the bottom, somewhere here. It's in here. It's one of these. It's right here. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So yeah. So okay, good. So now we want to learn something called GitHub, right? You don't have to know everything about GitHub. It's just a website, right? So we saw here, GitHub is a website. This website right here. Go ahead and create an account if you haven't already. GitHub is where you store your code, basically. So GitHub is like the Instagram for code. That's what I call it. Instagram for code. Yeah, so you store your code here. It's where, like, if you're looking for a job, this is where they look at. They're like, hey, let's see how much code this guy wrote or this lady wrote. Things like that. So it's really important as a developer to have an account on GitHub, and also to show like what you worked on. So here you see like all these projects that I worked on, like 187 of them. Most of them are just for teaching and stuff. And then it has this like chart which shows like your commits. When I say commits, I mean like how much code you pushed or you put in this website. So you see, the darker it is, the more times you committed that day. So these are days, basically, each day. So if you see 2021, I committed a lot, but 2020 was even, I committed some. 2019 also, like, I started committing a lot on 2019. But before that, I never used GitHub before that. So 2019 is when I started fully committing a bunch of stuff. So create an account here. And then also when you go to the assignment, you see that if you go to the assignment today, this week's assignment, you see that it has a link to GitHub. So if you click this, it will take you to GitHub, right? So you already have an account. You click that, and this is where you come. This is your assignment for today, by the way. For this week, this is your assignment. So you have to bring in this code into. Actually, I have to add more to it, but I'll fix that. I have to add index and things like that. If you want to bring in this code, you have to just like CodeBen, you have to fork it, right? So that's the first step, forking it. And I wrote some of the steps here first. So you have to fork it. So fork it, and then you have to clone it. Clone it means basically copy this stuff to my computer. So you copy this, and then you go to your terminal, and then you say here git clone. It's actual command. And then you paste the link there. And then it will clone everything in here to your computer. Another way to do it is by just downloading this zip file. I don't usually recommend this, especially when you're learning, because that will make it so that you depend on this instead of the terminal. And like if you're working, they expect you to know the terminal, like how to use the terminal, right? So keep that in mind. And you know, it's painful at the beginning, but it becomes a lot easier. And within a week, like if you try to use it a little bit, it will become super easy. Okay, so when you clone the code and put it in your computer, you make changes to it. So you add, I'll talk about it later. You add things to it and all that, but then you wanna send your code. So let me write something here. HTML, and then basic stuff, HTML. So this is our example we just created. Let's just write body. It doesn't matter what we write. It's just I'm showing you how to send this to GitHub. All right, and let's add a H1 here. Test project. Okay. So before you send to GitHub, your project has to have a README file, but I added that for you, so you don't have to worry about it in the assignment. I already added the README file here. So let's add README file to this one. We can say touch readme.md. So that's a GitHub thing. It doesn't allow you to commit without a README. So just gonna test. Okay, so now we actually made more changes. So we have to say git status to see the changes. It says, hey, you modified the index.html. So we have to add again. Add dot. And also we have to commit. So you'll get the hang of this commit thing. Changed, you can say changed. Oh, and also, yeah, changed index and added README. Okay. So now if we want to send to GitHub, we have to, you don't have to do this whole thing by yourself. I already did this for you. We have to actually create a something in here in GitHub. So let me quickly actually create that. You don't have to do this part. Test project 02. And you have to do this. Okay, and then that's it. Gonna create that. So I'm just creating a branch in a project in my account on GitHub. You don't have to do this at all when you're doing your project. And it gives me like an instruction of like what I need to do to send my project to GitHub, right? So on this one, you don't have to do. So let me quickly do this. So all I need to do is change this one. And also another thing is I need to link GitHub on my project. You don't have to do this one. Yours is already linked. So don't worry about that. And the last thing I need to do is I need to send my code. So git push is another command that you have to learn. Git push -u origin and then the branch name. And I'll write that down for you. All these commands will be written down for you. In my computer, it asks for this, but in yours, it will not ask for a password. So just type the password. You will not see someone typing password. It's part of like security in terminal. So now if we refresh this, we'll see the changes. Magic. So like, yeah, so I see this is README and this is the files we created. And there's this thing, but you don't worry about that. It's always there, part of like Mac and stuff. So good. Now we have everything in GitHub, right? So here's where like you come in. So you clone the project. So now like you fork it first, right? So in your assignment, you fork it and then you clone it, right? After you clone it and you make the changes, everything, then you want to send it back to GitHub. Before you do that, you have to create a branch. So the first step after cloning is creating a branch. The way to create a branch is by saying git checkout b and then the branch name, right? So you want a specific branch because you want to like put your changes in somewhere else other than like the main branch, right? So usually I tell students to write their first name dash their last name, right? Create. So now we switch to new branch. If we say git branch, we have two branches, main and Duranale. If we make changes now to our code, all the changes are going to go to here. So let's do that. Let's add a little bit here. Let's add maybe like a paragraph. Test paragraph. Okay. So now let's save that. Sometimes you have to say save here. Mine is automatic, so I turn on this auto save, and it will automatically save for me. So now if we say git status, it will say, oh, you made changes in index.html, but the branch is Duran Ali. So what do? So we just add our changes. We commit our changes, first add, and then git commit. You just have to like kind of like remember these commands, because as you can see, it's coming back all the time. Changes. Okay. So now we want to send, but we cannot use the same thing as before. We cannot say git push u origin main. We cannot say that, because right now we want to push our changes to Duran Ali, not the main. So you have to say Duran Ali. Okay, so it asks me the password. It's not going to ask you that one. So if we go back here, oh, it already sees my branch. It says, hey, it seems like you pushed changes. So GitHub is like amazing. It's like it detects everything you make with Git. It says, hey, you made changes, but it's not on the main account, on the main branch. It's on your Duran Ali branch. Do you want to create a pull request? What does pull request mean? It means like, do you want to push those changes to the main one? But let's say sometimes you don't own this branch. So for example, in like normal everyday work in companies, you're working with a team, and you don't own the branch. You cannot just add things to it. Somebody has to approve your changes. So you create a pull request. It means like, or PR, you will hear a lot of times PR. PR means like send your code, and then we're gonna review it, and then we're gonna add it. You're gonna add it, but we have to review it first. So pull request, and then sometimes you have to change it here. So when you do an assignment, let me know before you do the pull request. You have to change it to the Gibby School one here, and then you can just write a comment here. I changed the index and added paragraph. Right over here, you're gonna add me, right, reviewer. So when you submit an assignment, add me here as a reviewer. So type my name, Duran Ali, like that. And I should be, oh, actually, you have to add me as a collaborator. Although that I'm on my actual account, I can't add myself, but add me as a collaborator. So you go to settings here and then add me as a collaborator. I'll give you the instructions for that step by step. And also when you reach here, you could contact me and I can walk you over. So add me as a reviewer, and then that's it. Then you say create a pull request. So pull request. So now if we go back to our code, the changes are not there yet. As you can see, we have one pull request. It means like one request to make changes. And then you could like say, okay, let me see the changes you made. There's so many things here, but the only thing you need to look at is the file changes. The file changes will show you, hey, it seems like this person added this paragraph. That's what it's basically saying. It literally shows what you changed. And then if the person is happy with it, they will say, they will add a review. They will say something like approved here. And then because I cannot approve my own thing, it will say good to go. Something like I write usually L looks good to me, something like that, some acronym, or looks good to me. And then they will say, okay, looks good to me. And when everybody reviews and like they're like everything's good, then you merge it, right? You merge, but don't merge it until we do review. Okay, so that's how Git and GitHub work together. so that you could commit your code, right? So every change you make on your code, it has to be tracked by Git, and then you have to send it to GitHub, and then I have to look at it and then say, okay, this person make those changes. I'll give you a review. I'll tell you you did good or not. And then after everything looks good, then you can merge it to it, right? Any question about that? I know it's a lot, but I'll give you steps of how to do all this. And also, I'll give you another video of concise video, explain it step by step, how to push things to GitHub. And also I'll give you a cheat sheet of like the instructions, like the commands that we type here. So you're not gonna be lost. You're gonna have something, some resources, inshallah. Any question? Okay, I think we went over time. And also we have one more thing to do. So let's take a break and let's come back, and then I will show you how to create a basic responsive website. And then after that, we're gonna conclude, inshallah. It will just be we're gonna add like CSS, like media queries to it, and then that's it. So it won't be a lot, hopefully. So let's take a 10-minute break and then come back, inshallah. All right. So okay, so we did the whole CSS. We learned like the responsive design. We learned the media queries. We also learned forms and stuff like that. And then we also learned Git. What is Git? What is GitHub? And how to use Git to send things to GitHub, right? So let's practice that. We're gonna start we're gonna have a project, a small project we're gonna work on. But this project is gonna already have some code in it. So it's gonna have some CSS. All we're gonna focus is the responsive part, the media query part. So in your assignment, make sure you do this. Make sure you go to the project you worked on. So let me go to here. Not here. Yeah, here. Make sure, like, let's say you have, so the Fatima restaurant, you probably have it like this. You'll have some CSS here. Copy all this code, right? And add it to your project, right? So let me bring up the project that we're working on. Where is it? Let's put this one down. It's somewhere here. Okay, let's see, lecture project. Okay, starter. So let's start with the starter. We're gonna open it in VS Code. So let's open this project. Let's open it with, in VS Code, you could actually install an extension that's called the live, I think it's called live stream, something like that. Live. Don't remember. I'll share it with you if you guys need. But it helps you kind of like run your HTML. At the bottom, it says go live, and then it will open it in the opening here. So the good thing is, like, every time you make a small change, it will reflect that automatically instead of you saving it and refreshing. So the project we have today is simple. It's this great idea website. I'm gonna add the code, the CSS, right? The CSS here, it's empty now. We're gonna add the CSS. So the first thing we're gonna add is a CSS called reset CSS. So this CSS, you could get it from this website. CSS. Reset CSS is a CSS created by someone. It helps you reset everything, right? So you copy it and just paste it at the top of your CSS, right? I'll share this link with you before I forget. So all you have to do is just copy this part, put it at the top of your CSS file. The reason for this is the browsers automatically add padding and margin to your website automatically without you knowing it. I don't know why they do that, but they just add it. So let's reset everything by pasting this. And then you could just comment out at the bottom. Not that. Let's comment it. Reset end. So you just write your CSS after here. Right. And I have like a code hinting program. So you'll see some hints in my editor. But yeah, so now this is our project. What are we going to do is we're going to start with mobile first, right? What does that mean? So now it doesn't have a CSS, but we're going to add CSS, and it's going to look like a mobile version of the website. Before we do that, we have to add something called a, let's go back to here, actually, to the project. It's called the viewpoint or viewpoint portal. Like, I think it's called viewpoint, not portal. So viewpoint is a meta tag. You're going to add it to viewpoint HTML. You're going to add it to your HTML. This is going to make your website fit the window, basically. That's all it does. It's just this little code right here. You're going to copy it, add it to your HTML. In the tag, in the head, it's a tag, it's a meta tag. So you add it to the head. You don't need to know everything about it. All you need to know is that it looks at the device you're using and it fills the whole space, right? It doesn't leave a space empty or all that. And then the good thing is it makes your website so that you don't have a scrolling bar at the bottom. So there's no scroll bar at the bottom. So it tries to make everything fit in the window. That's what it does. It's the viewport. So that's the only one that we need to add in the HTML, right? Okay. Other than that, I think everything looks good. Okay. Let's go back the way it was here. All right. So let's make it like a mobile first, right? So we designed the mobile version. So I'm going to copy some CSS. So first we're going to target we're going to add the box sizing. So we're saving time. So you guys already know this, the box sizing. And then we're going to add the background, the body CSS. So the body CSS is basically, we're going to make the width to 100 and then margin 0. And then we're going to add a font family, which is going to make the website give that font basically. Another thing we need to just add is the paragraphs. Let's add something to the paragraphs. I'm going over this quickly because you guys already know this. So we just added some font and then font size and some line height. Let's also change something about the headers, the H1, H2, H3. We're going to add the font family of that, right? Font family. So this is how it looks so far. All right. Let's target this section, the nav section. So the nav section has an image and a navigation. The image is just the logo, right? So let's target that. So first thing we're going to target is the nav. So let's go down here. And you will have this as a reference, so don't worry about it. So we're going to go to the nav. So the nav is this. So this whole thing is the nav. And then we added a display flex so that we can make all these navigations fit perfectly, basically. And then also let's target the logo. The logo, if you go back, you see that the logo has a class called logo, right? So we're going to target that class right here. So we just made the class a block. Oh, the reason why the changes are not shown here is because we didn't add the CSS to the HTML. So let's go back here and add that here. So let's add it. So the way to add it is by using the link. So we're going to say link, and then we're going to say href. And then we're going to target the CSS, which is styles right now, .css. And that's it. We're gonna close it. It's just like this. Actually, we have to add rel, which is a style sheet. Rel is basically, what is this document? What is this? Is this a JavaScript file or is this CSS file? So you're just gonna say style sheet and then close it. Right. So as you can see now, the changes are applying right here. So remember, we added, we made the nav display flex, and then we made them column, right? As you can see. And the reason we're doing this is we're starting with the mobile. Remember, like we're making it look like mobile first, and then after that, we're gonna make it desktop with the media query. All right, so we added the logo. So the logo is in the center, as you can see, and also it's a block. It means like the navigations can go here to the right side. All right, let's add more. Let's change the navigations. So the navigations, as you can see, they're like squished together now. They're not good. So let's add some CSS to that. So this CSS changes, it adds a border to each one of them. And also it removes the underline. It changes the color to black, and it gives a pattern of 5 rem and 0. So this rem thing it's just like pixels, but it's for responsive design, right? So let's actually look into that. This is called CSS units. I'll give you a reference to them. So CSS units, you have pixels, right, which you guys learned. And then you have rem, which is the second one that's used the most. So rem is basically, it helps you with the responsiveness. So it's right here what it means, relative to font size of the root element. So that means basically if you zoom in the website right here, the font is gonna become bigger. Like if you zoom out, it becomes smaller and smaller. That's what the rem does for you. And then there's each rem, 1 rem means 16 pixels. So rem to pixels. You could convert them. There's a website that can help you convert. So 1 rem, it's 1 rem here is 16 pixels. So you could actually just say 16 pixels. But the problem is pixels don't size. When you make the website bigger, it wouldn't change. So the good thing about rem is it changes things. So usually used for like font size and padding size and things like that, right? So that's why you have it here, rem. Okay. And also, if you have a question, you could just type it. You could interrupt it, inshallah, no problem. I'm trying to finish up this so I can ask you guys a question if you have any question about it. So now we did the links right here. Looks good. We want to change like the whole header. Like actually the header is this section now. So I changed the header to the hero area, basically, of your lesson, the Fatima restaurant. This is called the hero area, but this one is I called it header. I don't know why. I should change it to something else, but it's the header. So it's this image and this text. It's supposed to be like bigger, and this image is supposed to disappear when we make it a mobile, right? So that's what we're going to do now. So let's target this header only first and make it all centered and look nicer, right? So we all center everything right here. And now let's target only the text, the big text, which is this one, and make it bigger. So let's target that. So how do we target that? Somebody help me. How do we target this H1? So we want to like, we want to find the parent element, right? Do you guys remember the parent element? Anyone? So we have header here, and we have a div. So let's ignore the div. Let's say, let's go with a header, because the div is very generic and it won't make sense to, there's a lot of divs. Yeah. So right, you're right, Fatih, you're right. So it's the parent is div. The only problem is there's a lot of div h1s, right? So let's target the header instead. So we're gonna say header h1, and we made it bigger. Let's actually add. Let's copy something here. So we're gonna add a couple of rules. So we made the line height different, and then also added some margin at the bottom so that we have a little space here at the bottom. Let's also change the button here, this button. So to target the button, all we have to do is just do header and then button, right? Like this. Okay, so let's do header, button. We could take the suggestion it gives us, but I have my own code. So I have a code suggestion software installed. So it's giving us all this CSS. But I created one. So that one is better. And also let's target the image. So we want to remove the image when it's a mobile. So how do we do that? The image has a ID called the hero image. How do you remove something in CSS? Like if you want to make something disappear, how do you do that? If we say display block, it's still here. How do we remove it? So yeah, exactly. So all you have to do is just say display none. So that will make it disappear. This is supposed to be a class. Hopefully that's the same. Material display none. Why is it not disappearing? Okay. Display none. All right, there's something that's not right. Oh, okay. You can tell me what's wrong. No, it's not media query. We didn't reach media query yet. Okay, exactly, Mohammed. It's an ID, right? This is an ID. And this is a class, right? So we have to make an ID like that. Good. And okay, so everything looks good so far at the top. And then we have a couple of articles to change. And then after that, we just change the media query so that when we expand, it's not like this forever, right? So let's target quickly. Let's target the navigation bar, which is here. Where's the navigation bar? Nav bar, which is this one. Let's change something about this one quickly. So let's do that. So we added margin 0 because we don't want like this space around it. And then let's go to the sections. So we have a couple of more sections to go. So we have section here. This section covers this area. So it has 2 divs, right? Each div has a h2 and paragraph. And then we have another section that has an image. And then we have a section, and we gave this secondary details, and this is primary details. So it has a specific ID, and this one covers most of it. And then the last section is this context, and then the last footer part is the copyright. So you guys already know like how this style works. So let's cover these sections. So primary, we're gonna start with the primary. First, let's give all sections a margin of 2 rem and 0, so that it basically it makes kind of like fill out the whole space, and then and also it gives them a breathing space basically between sections. So as you can see, there's a space now; they're not all together. Let's target all the titles of the sections, and let's make them a little bit bigger. So we're gonna say section H2 because all of them are H2. Section H2. Okay. I don't think it targeted. Let's see. Section H2. Right. Section H2, and then we have everything looks good. I'm not sure if it targeted. Let's move on. Let's target the paragraph, each paragraph. So each paragraph, this one's. So we basically target all of them, all the paragraphs. So we're gonna say section P, and then we're gonna change something about it. So let's change the font and the margins. So font, we made it a little bit kind of smaller, and then we changed the margin to 0. All right. Now let's target the. So that was all of them. So all of them, what we just did affects all the paragraphs and all the H2s that we have, right? So as you can see, everything looks laid out better. Now we're gonna target. We're gonna create a border. Actually, we don't have to create that. Let's target the image. This image. Let's make it the width 100%. So it has already a ID. So it has this ID. I mean class. Sorry, that's class. So let's target that dot class, and let's give it a max width of 100% because we want it to fit the whole page every time we scale. We want it to fit like that, and then when it reaches a certain point, it stops scaling, which is fine. And then let's fix the footer. So the footer, we want the text to be centered. So as you can see here, this text is not centered. Let's actually see the contact information. So the contact information is good. I'm not sure why it's not centered. Oh, actually, yeah, we just need to add a couple of things to it. It's fine though. It's okay. Yeah, let's fix the footer first. So the footer, we just made it centered like that. Okay, so we added text align center, and then the last thing is yeah, I think we'll keep it at that. So that's it. So that's it for the mobile. So everything looks like it's aligned. There's a space between them, but it's not for desktop. So this is just for mobile. And we could actually look at it in the mobile version here. So you can see, it looks nice on mobile. We could give some space around this text. We could give a margin, which is fine. I can add margin to section div. Okay, I'm not sure why this margin didn't affect section div. Yeah, I should have affected it, but okay. Let's add that. Let's add 50 pixels. Okay, yeah, it's affecting. So I'm not sure. Maybe I need to increase it to. So this is okay. Yeah, so this is the top and this is the right and left. So let's add this. Maybe 1 rem around it. So you can see there's a space around it, so looks nicer. Okay. So the media query now. So the media query, we're just gonna change a couple of things. That will make it so that it looks nicer in desktop too. Any questions so far about what we just did? So this is basically the mobile version first, before we get to the desktop. Any question? Okay. So yeah, let's add media query. Keep in mind that media query always goes at the bottom, right? The reason for that is media queries are So CSS is a cascading. So that means everything is applied from top down. So if you put a media query at the top, then and then you change it here, then this is going to be applied. You know, the media query is going to be overwritten. So keep that in mind. All media queries go at the bottom. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. So we're just going to write here media. And we're just going to say, yep. So we're going to say max, I mean min width. Keep in mind, if you say min width, it means a mobile. This is a mobile. So let's say something like 500 pixels. So when we reach 500 pixels, this is what we're going to do. So let's add some rules. First thing we're going to change is the navigation, because remember, like the nav it's like this. So we want to change it to like a horizontal. So let's do that. So we're going to target the nav, and then we're going to make it vertical. So now if you expand it to 500, let's get out of this. Okay. Yeah. If you expand to 500, see it changes. If you go underneath 500, which I don't know why it's not doing that. I think we have to go back to the mobile. Yeah. So if you expand more than 500, then it will change that like that. That's what we want. Another thing is the links. We want to remove the borders. So we're going to say here nav. Let's remove the borders. 0 borders. So nav A 0 borders. And this is all in the media query. Another thing is the header. We want to make it so that the font is it's bigger. Oh, I mean this one, this part, the innovation on demand. Let's make the H1 bigger. So now it's a little bit bigger. And also we want to bring back the image, right? And also make the text of the button bigger. If you want to make the text button bigger, you just add that header button. So this is all in media query. As you can see, we're just modifying what we did at the top to fit for desktop. And then let's change the articles before we go anywhere. So the articles, as you can see, they're stacked on top of each other. We want to put right next to each other, right? So we want to change the display to the we want to display change to row instead of that. So as you can see, we change it to row. We say display. Remember, display flex by default is a row, so you don't have to specify and say flex direction row. And we added a justify content space around. Space around so that it fits the space. So if you expand, as you see, when we reach 500, it changes to that. So it goes back and forth. So this is the responsive that we're talking about when we mentioned in the lesson. Okay. So just if you want to modify things, you add it into media query. I don't want to take too much time. So I'm going to keep it. I'm going to finish it, the rest, and then send it to you guys. But you understand the concept. It's basically, first you start with mobile. You design the mobile first, right? How it's going to look like in mobile. And then you add a min width, 500 pixels. And then you say, okay, anything here applies to the desktop. So you just make it bigger, and then you modify it so that it looks like a desktop. So how it's supposed to look like in the bigger computer. And that's it. And then you use Flexbox and modify things the way you want it. And also right here, we need to bring back the image. So we say, I think it was the ID, right? Hero image display block. And also we have to modify it so that it goes to the right side instead of here. So we'll modify that. I'll modify for you guys that. Any questions so far? Can you record it? Which one? We're recording this lesson.
You said you're gonna finish it up, so whatever is left, will you be able to record it? If not, that's fine.
I can record. It's fine. Yeah, I can record it, and I'll send it to you. But yeah, the main idea is add your changes here, and then start with mobile version. And when you're working, when they see you doing this, they will be impressed, because a lot of people don't know how to do like mobile first development, which is kind of new. Any questions so far? All right, sounds good. Yeah, I think that's it for this lesson. The assignment is going to be is already posted there, so it's going to be here. I'll add more instructions to it. But the main idea is using Git to clone it, fork it first. Make sure to fork it. If you don't fork it, it won't work. Fork it first, clone it, copy this link, use terminal, clone it, make changes, create your own branch. Before you make changes, create the branch, your own branch. And there's some instructions here too, right here. Clone it and then CD into your project. And then your first name, last name, create a branch. This is the command to create the branch without the dot. And this is going to be your first name, last name. And then make your changes, like modify the project and everything, and then do that. So what I want you guys is, I want the Fatima restaurant to look like this, right? This is your assignment. So you have a desktop and you have a mobile. So this is how it's supposed to look like. So it's a big picture. So I'm gonna show you here. So the desktop is supposed to look like this. So if you haven't finished it, finish it and then modify it so you have images. I already added the images for you guys. So you have the images here. You have in assets, you have images, and you have all the images you need with the correct size. And then you're gonna add that. Add a form, modify it, make it look nice. And then modify here so that you have these two next to each other. And then in mobile, I want you guys to do it like this. So it should look like a mobile like this. So Fatima restaurant, the navigation, the image. You could make this image disappear if you want, or you could keep it and put it right underneath it. And this is how it's supposed to look like this. The images are supposed to look like this instead of right next to each other. They're supposed to stack, right? And then the form like this. So it's very similar. So this is your work for the week. It's not easy, but you have a whole week and you need to pace yourself, ask questions. I come on live on afternoons. I'll message you guys if I'm coming on Zoom. If not, you can send me a message and I'll reply to you. Let me stop the recording.